You think this is funny?
In a cosmic sort of way, yes.
Well, Mr. Funny Man, is this how you get your sick kicks?
What? It's just an ordinary... Oh my goodness!
It's another case of Disney killing any credibility they had left since they started making horrible remakes of their animated movies, assuming ruining Star Wars hasn't done that already, and this just might be the most desperate case so far. Moana 2026 isn't the worst of these remakes, but it's definitely the most pointless. I know it's been said a lot how horrible and unneeded these movies are, but now it's gotten to the point that they're remaking movies that aren't even 10 years old yet. And the trailer certainly didn't do it any favors either. Everything about it just felt cheap and lazy, with that god-awful wig and muscle suit on The Rock as the pinnacle of Disney cutting corners in favor of actually using their assets to give us something that isn't an assault on the eyeballs. But I know it's not fair to judge a movie based solely on its trailers. Thankfully, I was able to pirate this trash so I don't have to worry about giving Disney money to critique this garbage. And for those who are gonna bitch about how me making a video talking about this horrible movie is just gonna give it more attention, yeah, I don't think I have to worry about that. And if you think pirating a movie from an evil multi-billion-dollar company that supports Chinese concentration camps makes me just as bad as the evil multi-billion-dollar company that supports Chinese concentration camps, well, fuck you. Some of you might be thinking how I would have placed this movie in my ranking video, and I'll probably give you an idea of it at the end. I would have been not more tolerable, but more forgiving of this one if Disney just had some level of self-control and waited a couple of years before doing a Moana remake. You could argue that this was their way of celebrating the movie's 10th anniversary, but this is a really shitty way of doing it, and we all know that wasn't the real reason. This was clearly just some half-assed attempt at nostalgia baiting. Whether it was done to make up for the money they lost on Rachel Zegler, which isn't going very well, or to inflate The Rock's ego even further than it already was, you can easily tell this movie was not done for creative reasons, and it becomes even more evident after seeing it firsthand. Of course, the big question is, how bad is it? Well, it's better than Rachel Zegler, if that means anything. Right out of the gate, it's made very clear that this is not gonna go well. The woman reading us the familiar origin story just sounds so dour and disinterested in what she's talking about. It's a mythological fairy tale about a giant island spirit that takes the form of a raging fire demon when her heart is stolen. You'd think there would be more emotion and enthusiasm in her voice. And this is a consistent problem with every single actor. Everyone just sounds like they're reading the script from the 2016 movie without adding any of the proper emotion that made those lines stick. Their dialect comes across as really foamed in, they don't have a wide enough range of emotion when they talk, they just come across as completely bored. I wouldn't blame them considering the movie they're in, but they can at least try to make this worthwhile. As for the physical aspect of the acting, it's kind of mixed. Some of the actors have the right facial expressions and body language, but then there's others who just don't feel like they're committed to their roles. The little kid playing Moana in the prologue, for example, has some enthusiasm, which fits her character as an excitable kid. But then she's just constantly breaking eye contact with the other actors. She finds the floor more interesting somehow. There's also this really weird collision going on between Catherine Laga and Dwayne Johnson with their acting just feeling too opposite of each other. On one hand, Catherine feels like she's doing too much, and on the other hand, Dwayne feels like he's doing too little. And by too little, I mean literally nothing. He is absolutely terrible. He never does anything more than the bare minimum. His acting chops look like they just took the day off. He doesn't properly emote. He doesn't have any engaging chemistry with Catherine. He has a total of 2 emotions on his face throughout the entire film. It really does feel like he just did this for the paycheck and his ego. He talks like he's doing a car commercial instead of returning to his role as Maui. Even when talking about the backstory, which you'd think would be a deeply traumatic memory for him to look back on, he just sounds half asleep like someone put NyQuil in his coffee. At least in the original, there was more of a reaction to how he recollected it. Here, he just comes across like he's sleepwalking. For crying out loud, you can afford to break your monotone for 5 seconds. Do we need to get Kevin Hart in this movie for that to happen? And then you have the song numbers, which I'll admit I feel sort of mixed on. For the most part, the singing isn't too bad. Dwayne Johnson isn't really a good singer, but that's to be expected considering the original. The other singers are actually pretty engaged, including Catherine herself. She does a decent job capturing the range and tone of the original songs, though she's obviously not as good as Chloe Cravallo. At least from what I heard, there isn't any horrible auto-tuning, which doesn't get in the way of the audio. The choir for the other songs are good. Her dad has some alright singing chops. It's honestly a far cry from Rachel Zegler, where you were constantly constantly being assaulted by horrible auto-tuning and terrible vocal range. But that leads into how painfully boring these songs are visually. It's basically the same problem as Beauty and the Beast, where the singing is passable but the cinematography and choreography is undercooked and dull. They just look like they're trying to record the audio with no real passion put into it. As bad as Aladdin was, they choreographed the hell out of those musical numbers, taking advantage of the set pieces and using all sorts of energy from the actors and dancing while capturing the scope of the world. It felt like they were making an effort to make the songs fun to watch, while Moana doesn't do that. For example, in the original, when Moana is singing How Far I'll Go, she does all sorts of cool stuff as she rushes to the water, showing you how energized and passionate her character is. It captured her desire to explore the ocean in a dynamic cinematic way. The remake just has her standing at the top of the hill. There's no innovation to make it visually appealing, it's just her standing around. Every other musical number in the movie is like this, from You're Welcome to Shiny, where they arguably just copy the sheet music from the original and call it a day. There's no visual flair to them, it's just the actors walking around the sets and singing. The remake also has a weaker sense of comedy. The timing of all the jokes just feels off on account of the slower pacing they go with. It completely throws off the impact of the punchline, so in spite of basically being the same jokes, they don't land properly because of the awkward change they made to the tone. In the remake, when Maui throws Moana overboard, he jumps on the boat to send her flying like on the opposite side of a seesaw. They wanted to show off his super strength, but it only makes the jokes slower and less creative. In the original, he just grabs her and tosses her off the boat with a stoic look. It's more effective because it has better timing. The speed in which he grabs her and tosses her catches you off guard, and the animation breathes more life onto his facial expression, making his irritation more humorous. Trust me, this is just one of the many examples of the remake just fumbling the jokes with a style that doesn't suit them. It could be these jokes were just more suited for an animated movie, but it's also because everything is slower and less witty. And then there's the changes they made to the story. Well, sort of. And what I mean is that they pretty much did the same thing The Little Mermaid did. They copy the draft of the original story without really changing that much. But at the same time, they make the pacing slower, which just throws everything off. You'd think they would avoid having this problem since this remake manages to have a runtime that's roughly the same as the original. There's no 20 minutes of added bullshit or anything like that, but you can also see where exactly they did things differently from the original, and not in a good way. Just going by one example, the scene where the grandma is on her deathbed just drags out compared to the original. It's a lot slower, which reduces the emotion and urgency in the situation, and the voice acting and expressions are really pale and plain, like they're just going through the motions. Those looks of desperation and tenseness on the characters' faces from the original, they replace it with the two just kinda staring at each other, with Catherine looking sort of sad. And the line readings are trying way too hard to be dramatic. They say the lines with all these awkward pauses that take away from the bitter and hopeless vibe the original was able to capture properly. And because of how much time they just spend copying the old draft, they don't think about the little details that helped make everything feel energized. Moana is supposed to be different from the rest of her people. She's supposed to be the outlier who wanted to explore the world outside her island while everyone else was content with staying there. But you wouldn't be able to see that because of how sluggish and limp everyone looks. There's a lack of real authenticity to their body language and interactions, which takes away from the idea that they're singing and dancing about how upbeat their life is supposed to be. Everything just feels bankrupt of personality because of how stale and recycled the plot is. Instead of making something worthwhile out of it, they just imitate the original movie without even trying to differentiate from it. And you'd think that would be safer and a good idea compared to other remakes that change too much to the point of fucking everything up. But that doesn't help the movie to find its own identity. It makes you go, why am I watching this when I can just get more out of watching the original? It's not as bad as The Lion King, considering there was far more wrong with that piece of shit than just copying the draft of the original, but it just makes the movie pointless. It removes the impact of Moana struggling with her responsibilities and how she sings about it, or Maui using a cheerful song to lead her into a false sense of security before stealing her boat. It just bears the question of why remake this if nothing good comes out of changing it from a cartoon to real life. It just ruins the believability of everything on screen. The slower pacing results in the build-up to a lot of stuff being misdirected and not landing, and they try to distract you from this by throwing in a small handful of things that weren't in the original, only for them to come across as cringe filler. That whole savior of both men and women line, it's just as bad in the movie as it was in the trailer. And this line is in the movie because America is a pussy nation now when we have to show off how not bigoted towards women we are. And they thought this was more important than capturing the emotions of the characters and the heartbreak they go through during sadder scenes. In the original, you can see tears in Moana's eyes and she was grieving and left right before her grandma died. But here, she doesn't even cry. She just has a pouty face. In spite of being 99% the same script, it comes across as lifeless because of those little details they forgot, or deliberately left out because they want to focus on how cool they think it is to recreate all these scenes in live action. And that's even before we get into how this movie botched the beautiful visual style of the original. This is Disney's first time remaking one of their 3D animated movies instead of their 2D ones. And you'd think that would be in the movie's favor since they don't have to worry about meeting the style of such a vastly different craft. But it makes the visual differences more painfully obvious. This remake looks sterile, desaturated, muted, and drained of all the color and personality of the backgrounds. There's so many poorly lit green screens, and the way they recreate a lot of these shots is severely lacking in spectacle. This remake has a higher budget than the original, and it somehow looks even worse. How do you do it? In fact, these people were so fucking cheap that they went so far as to CGI a beach in a live-action remake of Moana. Do you not realize how stupid that sounds? Finally, there's the issue of all the fantasy elements and animal characters in the movie. It feels like they wanted to make these things intentionally animated to be in spirit with the original, but they still have to mesh with the live-action elements. And when they do, it all just looks fake. The animals somehow look more cartoonish than the ones from the actual cartoon from 10 years ago, and Tamatoa looks like some sort of mechanical crab you would see in a Mega Man game. Te Fiti and Te Ka are also less detailed because of how realistic they tried to make them. These are just not designs that are suited for live action. The coconut people look like Minion rejects, and the ocean comes across as a recycled special effect from the MCU, which doesn't even sound like it should be possible. You'd think they would be able to pull off something as simple as water in a movie that's set in the ocean, and they just make it look like bubbly, liquefied jello. And that fucking chicken? Mother of Jesus. He is straight up horrifying. I've seen people say some pretty bad things about the visuals in Return to Silent Hill, Animal Farm, Starfleet Academy, and Mercy, and don't get me wrong, there's definitely reasons to believe them. But I can confidently say with 100% certainty that every waking second of this hellspawn's time on screen are the single worst computer-generated effects you will see in a movie this year. Just one look into those cold, hollow, lifeless eyes that the people at Disney clearly thought were just so cutesy and adorable made me want to run to the nearest church and demand the priest perform an exorcism on me. He is actually that hideous to look at. Did you learn nothing from the 7 middle fingers to actual dwarves? He looks so diseased and poisonous for anyone with functioning eyeballs. I can't even imagine their target audience of little kids finding this abomination charming. The Disney executive who allowed this to make it into the movie needs to be shot in the face immediately. I don't know who the hell keeps greenlighting the nightmare fuel CGI in these remakes, but it's definitely not a human being. And that's Moana 2026, a remake that offers practically nothing over the original, except turning Heihei into the stuff nightmares are made of. All the characters that were once full of life, replaced with lifeless actors. All of those beautiful musical numbers, stripped of their visual appeal. The gorgeous tropical design of the original, replaced with bullshit CGI. The witty humor, replaced with dull, predictable jokes. The solid pacing the original had, all of it is scattered because of how they made everything slower. I am so relieved this thing is bombing at the box office because 1, it deserves it, and 2, because it'll hopefully encourage Disney to not make any more remakes of their 3D movies, especially when they're not old enough to warrant a remake. It's bad enough that they felt the need to remake Moana at all, but the fact that they didn't even wait 10 years before remaking it just makes it even worse. 20 years would have been enough. Next thing you know, they're gonna try and do live-action remakes of Encanto and Zootopia and Frozen and Wreck-It Ralph and Chicken Little. God have mercy on us if it comes to that. So if you're a human being worth any shred of respect, do us all a favor and keep boycotting this thing. And if you're a parent with kids who for whatever reason thought the trailers didn't look like hot garbage, just sit them in front of the original. As for how I would have placed this in my ranking video, I would say it's better than Dumbo but worse than The Little Mermaid. It's not as lifeless and boring as Dumbo, but The Little Mermaid didn't have nightmare fuel CGI. Then again, it did have the Scuttlebutt song, so who knows, maybe that evens it out. Let's just hope that Disney finally learns something from this piece of shit bombing and put some sort of stop to these garbage live-action remakes. Oh God, no.